So the next step for exercise 6 is to use local storage so that if I refresh the browser, my tweets that I made prior will still show. So local storage has a few methods here to set data or retrieve data or remove it. The trick is when you're setting the data, make sure that you pass it some variable name, and the second parameter has to be a string. So how am I going to get the browser to remember my tweets array? Another question you have to ask yourself is where in your code do you want the browser to remember? I think the best way would be somewhere in your tweeting function, because once you've inserted your new tweets inside the tweets array, you want to immediately remember it. So I could put like some code here to remember it, or maybe here. So what I think I'll do first is just create a function called remember, which I'll call later. So I'll say function remember, and then we're going to store our current tweets array in local storage. But first, remove any last memory of it. So we want to say local storage.remove item, and then we have to give it the name that we gave it when we set it. Now we didn't set it yet, so let's set it here. So let's pretend we removed it. Now we have to store it again. So local storage.set item, and then give it some name. Now I could say tweets array, the same name as our tweets array, but just to maybe be different and less confusing, I'll just give it Twitter. Now here I can't just say my array name, right? It has to be a string. So how do I get around that? I can use json.stringify, and that'll work. And now that I gave it a name here, I can refer to that name up top here. Done. So now I have to call this strategically somewhere here. So what I think I'll do is I'll actually call it within my render function. That way, when my code base grows and I call my render function elsewhere in my code, it'll still remember. Okay, so let's try that, save that. Let's go back here, and let's open up the console, Control-Shift-J, click on the application tab, and make sure you click on local storage, and click on that local host, and you should see any indication if local storage is working. So let's see what happens. Let's tweet, and you can now see here, this is the name I gave, and here's the string version of my array. And if I open it up, you can see what I typed right there under the tweet property. So let's try typing something else. Tweet, and now because I use the unshift method, that means my newest tweet should be at the 0 position. There it is, and the older tweet should be in the 1 position, right? So that's working, but if I refresh the browser, it still doesn't show. So I need some way to access what the browser currently remembers and then display it. So where is the best place to do that? I think the best place to do that is right there, const tweets. So when you're initializing tweets, you want some way to get or fetch the local storage memory. So what you could do is you could say local storage.get item Twitter, or if that doesn't exist, then use my empty array, right? So if this does not exist, this will evaluate to false. Therefore, because we're using the or operator, false or whatever, it'll always evaluate that whatever and stick that into my tweets. But if this is true, then true or whatever will always be true, right? So it won't even evaluate this part because we're using or. As soon as the first part is true, then it'll return true and use that in here. Now the problem is this just gives us the string, right? We stringified it, so we have to say, you have to unstringify it by saying json.parse, and that should work. Now if I refresh now, let's see what happens. Actually, I should clear the data, so clear all, so no more local storage. Try it now. Oh, it's kind of, oh, that's interesting. How did it remember from before? Let's clear out that all, refresh, just to make sure. Tweet, okay. So it remembered 1, Now if I refresh, it didn't show. And I think the reason why it didn't show is because our code doesn't actually call render right away. So I think I need to call render maybe right here, although probably the better way is after all these functions are declared and all these add event listeners are declared, then we should say put our commands down there, render. So let's try that. Let's clear our values, refresh. Notice it's now using an empty array. There we go. If I refresh, there we go. So if I keep on making some more tweets, and then refresh, there we go.